Hoodwinked is a beloved, poorly animated children's movie from 2005. It's also got the craziest economy you could possibly imagine.
And goodies make the woods go round.
Where they come from, where they going.
If you look closely, every character either works in food service, law enforcement, or the media, none of which are typically very high-paying jobs. But then you have fat cats like Granny Puckett who could just ignore their business to go pursue extreme sports, while most other characters literally lose their home when the Goody Bandit steals their recipes. Now, I know what you're thinking, Hoodwinked is just a dumb kids movie. But stay with me here, because I think all of this points to a deeper and darker truth behind Hoodwinked. One where a higher power seems to be hell-bent on keeping the people of Woodland County down.
We've literally got to blow them away.
Hi, I'm pretending to be Annie Austin. My name is Nathan Denzine, and I used to be a pretty good journalist, which feels very silly to say for this video, but I guess you can trust me. If for some reason you've made it this far in the video and you don't know what Hoodwinked is, here's a really brief synopsis. The story revolves around Red, who delivers her granny's goodies through the woods. She's worried about her granny's business because of the Goody Bandit, who has made a habit of stealing recipes from goodie shops, which then immediately put them out of business. After a weird day of deliveries, Red goes to Granny's house to find the big bad wolf dressed as her grandma.
We just gotta sit around here and talk about how big I'm getting.
While Granny is tied up in the closet before an axe-swinging madman busts through the window. Cut to the present, and all of our characters are ready to be interrogated by Detective Nikki Flippers. After each person tells their side of the story, we learn that the Big Bad Wolf is actually an investigative journalist, the axe murderer is an actor, and Granny does extreme sports. It all leads to Flippers figuring out that Boingo, the cute bunny, is actually the Goody Bandit, and that he has an evil plan to take over the woods after stealing all the recipes. A couple fight scenes later, Boingo is brought to justice, and everyone lives happily ever after. I remember loving this movie as a kid, and honestly, it still holds up to this day. But we're here because a couple of weeks ago, I was rewatching Hoodwinked with my girlfriend, and this scene in particular caught my eye.
Come on, let's go. Where are we going now, Mama?
If you didn't catch that, this family of beavers not only just lost their business, but then they lost their home at the same time. It made me wonder how an economy could be, one, so dependent on goodie shops that there are this many goodie shops to be closing in the first place, and two, in such a bad economic spot that losing your business would mean losing your home in one fell swoop. So I figured my first step to unravel this cartoon economy would be to figure out what each character we see on screen does for a job. That way we have a starting point to figure out how this economy might actually work and how healthy it is. I did, however, set some guidelines for myself to make this task possible, and I'm only going to be counting characters that, very clearly have a job. Random forest creatures like the worms in this scene or the skiers at this mountaintop aren't gonna count because hypothetically they could all just be hanging out, and I can't go out and do a real field survey to ask these characters what they actually do for a job, so if they don't clearly have a job, they're just not being counted. What I came up with was a list of roughly 64 characters, and all of them can be put into 5 different categories: goodies, performers, law enforcement, media, and a miscellaneous category for everybody else. Our largest category, goodies, includes 18 of our characters. We have some obvious people in this category like Red and Granny, but I'm also going to be including Boingo and all of his henchmen in this category because ultimately their goal is goodie domination.
It makes my snacks a little more habit-forming.
It also includes all the goodie businesses that close during Red's scene and that guy that's dressed in a zebra costume. Our second largest category with 17 characters is kind of surprisingly performers. Here we have Kirk, our aspiring actor, plus the band that he wants to join, plus the band that's at the top of the mountain. I know I said I wouldn't count anybody up on the mountain, but this band has a big banner at the back with their band name on it, so I feel like it's pretty safe to assume that they do this for a living. And I'm also going to be throwing in these 5 hedgehogs because I'm pretty sure that they're male dancers. Our third largest category is law enforcement, which includes all the cops that we see in the first scene and Detective Nikki Flippers. Coming in at number 4 with 9 characters is media, which includes Wolf, Twitchy, all of the TV reporters that we see in the first scene and the last scene, and then those 2 commercial directors. And then our smallest category, miscellaneous, includes like those 2 businessmen that we see in Red's scene and the taxi driver. So all in all, we're looking at a workforce that includes either people making or selling food or people in public-facing roles. But there are also a lot of other jobs in the Hoodwinked universe that are implied but never shown on screen with a character attached to them. For instance, the existence of cars mean that there have to be car manufacturers and mechanics. We also see newspaper newspapers, magazines, and TVs, which all require large staffs to create and broadcast media. Or the fact that Japheth is clearly living in an old mining outpost. There are more examples, but if we're taking this movie at face value, which we are here, it implies that these industries do exist somewhere, but nobody in this neck of the woods is actually working in them. And there are more oddities on top of that. Like, how can Granny Puckett make so much money that she's an extreme athlete most of the time, while these other goodie shops are shutting down business and leaving their homes entirely after a few days of missed business? Why does this one hedgehog have enough money to buy 2 sports cars, but nobody else in this universe has enough money to buy 1 car? And why are there so many cops, performers, and media compared to regular citizens? Before I get too far into this chapter, I want to say I am not an economist and I am not an expert on economies. This entire endeavor was just meant to be fun, so when I inevitably get something wrong, there's going to be some very smart people in the comments who are correcting me. With that out of the way, let's start breaking down our characters to figure out who might be rich, who might be in the middle class, and who might be poor. Immediately, we can assume that Granny Puckett is some sort of rich CEO. Her business has done well enough to create branded merch like her parachute, and on top of that, she seems to bake just as often as she goes downhill skiing. In the same vein, we can probably assume that Red is rich despite doing the day-to-day operations of her grandma's business. They show her leaving a very sizable house at the start of the movie, and we can kind of assume that at some point Granny Puckett's money is coming down the pipe for her. And I'm also going to include the hedgehog that got 2 different sports cars ruined during the filming of this movie, because like, who else has the money to do that? But that's about it for our rich people. Next up, we have our middle class, which includes all of our cops, including Nikki Flippers. Cops generally make a pretty good living, but even a detective like Nikki Flippers is not going to make enough for me to call them rich. I'm also including all of our media characters in this bucket because journalists did not have it as bad in 2005 as they have it today. And I'll also put a couple of the miscellaneous characters in here, like the first businessman we see in Red's scene and the taxi driver, which leaves us with our poor characters. And I'm going to put all of our other goodie makers in here for a few reasons. First of all, not a single one of them owns a car, and it seems like the only transportation in this area other than a bicycle is the taxi, which is pretty typical of low-income rural areas. Plus, with everybody else baking goodies and then losing their goodie business, paired with there being no other job shown, we kind of have to assume that they're baking goodies out of necessity. After all, we literally see that Beaver family lose their home after the snack shack goes out of business. Plus, in the real world, while a lot of small businesses like Granny's can thrive, a lot of them also struggle. So then on top of our goodie makers, I'm also going to put our performers in this category. Not that a band or an actor can't get rich, but we clearly see Kirk struggling to get a callback, and I don't think that either a yodeling band or a mountaintop ski band are like raking in the dough. Typically, these kind of performers are doing pretty well in the moment, but once gigs dry up, times can get lean pretty quickly. We're also including Boingo and his posse in here because you usually don't turn to a life of crime if things are going great for you. So we have a wealth pyramid that includes like 3 people in the top, about 15 people in the middle, and then everybody else fighting for their fucking life at the bottom. And most of these people on the bottom are just selling food to each other, which kind of makes Hoodwinked look like a subsistence economy. A subsistence economy is where people make just enough goods and food to meet their needs with not a lot else left over. Instead of producing their goodies for profit, this community is held together by a bunch of goodie makers who are providing sustenance for everybody. And when goodie makers lose their business, that means they have to leave because they can no longer provide for themselves or their community. In this way, the local Hoodwinked economy kinda sorta looks like how native tribes would move across America when they would follow food throughout the seasons. But then at the same time, you have people like Granny Puckett who are clearly well established in this area and absolutely raking in the dough. She implies that she made her fortune by the Puckett family gobbling up recipes over the year and creating a goodie empire.
For as long as critters have had a sweet tooth, Pucketts have been making and collecting recipes all over the world.
Kinda sounds familiar. But this dichotomy of a really rich upper class and a really poor lower class isn't unheard of in the real world. The first example that popped into my head was Haiti, where a very rich ruling class has hoarded wealth over a number of years, while large parts of the country still live in a very poor subsistence economy. But that comparison starts to fall apart when you consider the huge number of cops and reporters in Hoodwinked. While Haiti does obviously have both, they don't have enough cops to even break up the gangs that are operating in Port-au-Prince, and they don't have nearly the percentage of journalists in their country as in the Hoodwinked universe. So really what we're looking for is some sort of system that has a wealthy few, a couple people in the middle class that are mostly cops and reporters, and then a very poor lower class who are just fighting for survival. Which leads me to a weird conclusion. Let me explain how I got here. A small group of elites sit at the tippy top and collect wealth from everybody else in this pyramid. Then a large layer of cops sit underneath them to help maintain peace, legitimize the system around them, and create a false narrative to keep everybody in check. Well, most people work at the bottom of this pyramid with the constant fear that losing your job means losing your home. So the first theory I thought of was that Hoodwinked is a company town. Company towns were places where basically everything in the town, including all of the stores and the homes, were owned by one company that was also the main employer in that area. They were popular in the late 19th and early 20th century, and historians usually look back at them and think that they were exploitative and controlling. I don't think exploitative, whatever. Because the company controlled all of the housing and all of the stores, prices were really high, and it usually meant that if you lost your job, you had to move. Company towns also had large private police forces that would enforce company policy on employees' free time. In Hoodwinked, as we hear the Swan Cop say at the beginning of the movie, they do have a large cage to throw prisoners in when they don't like them.
How about a cage?
Bring in the cage!
I was being sarcastic.
Sarcasm, strike the cage.
And as we know in the Hoodwinked universe, these police are about 25% of our total characters. But company towns didn't typically have tons of reporters or performers in town, and Hoodwinked certainly does. So we turn to my second theory. Hoodwinked is a colony. Now, colonies used to be all the rage before like the 1950s. Portugal had a bunch, the Netherlands had a bunch, England had a huge empire, and America still has a bunch of colonies to this day. The main purpose of a colony was to extract wealth and resources from a local area and bring it back to the homeland. It was a place where a small group of elites controlled everything: housing, prices, media, police, along with a lot more. In this system, local residents were usually pretty poor while they stripped their homeland of all resources to send back to some faraway king. If they weren't enslaved, the local population was usually just doing their most to just sustain each other. Kinda sounds like Hoodwinked so far. In Hoodwinked, Granny Puckett may be part of a rich elite group because she's clearly traveled the entire world before. So maybe this rich cabal recently found a forest of animals that started to speak and act like people, and decided to exploit this brand new labor class. Think about it, we see a whole bunch of animals that are still living in the wild as animals, which means that the group of characters that we see are actually at the cutting edge of evolution. For the first time, they're stepping into consciousness and are immediately being put to work in the goodie industry. And this is where my two theories start to converge. Instead of being sent by a king, what if this area's rich ruling class was sent by a company, one that wanted to tap into a previously non-existent labor force to boost their profits? When they got to the woods and saw that most of the animals had turned people-like, they immediately told all of them that they had to start baking goodies. But then they took a second group of people away and trained them to be the cops and the media and their performers. That way they had their lower class baking a whole bunch of stuff for them, while they had a middle class that was there to maintain peace and order. But how would a company get rich off of this? It's not like baked goods are super expensive. Here's where things get crazy. If I wanted to get rich off bakers, I would sell them the equipment that they needed to bake. And if you sold all these animals shitty equipment at a premium price, they would have absolutely no idea because they've never experienced this kind of stuff before. Which made me start thinking about Granny. After all, she seems to be an incredibly rich baker, but what if she wasn't baking at all? What if she was selling people their baking equipment and they didn't know it? The only goodies we ever see out of Granny's shop are about a dozen muffins, yet she has branded merch? We also know that Granny has traveled the world for competitions. We see Granny take and sign a clipboard like it's second nature. She's also literally the only character in this entire movie with a cell phone. She knows how to talk to reporters. She's already kept one secret life hidden, but yet we're just supposed to take her at her word that she's a baker. It doesn't add up. Unless she's been hiding where her money has been coming from this entire time. While the forest sees a sweet old lady who's selling goodies to everybody, she might have secret middlemen who are infiltrating this forest and selling her overpriced goods to these poor forest animals. That's why when the recipes are lost, these businesses close up so quickly. They have super expensive equipment that doesn't work very well, so they're always running at a loss. It means that every single day would have just been a fight for survival to pay off their really expensive equipment. And when they go out of business, there's purposely no other business opportunities in the forest, and so they have to leave. It's the perfect crime for Granny. She gets to have her cake and eat it too. While being beloved by the community, she gets to suck them dry of all their resources in a colonial company town. So I guess now we know why Hoodwinked's economy is both completely held up by the goody business and why it's in such bad shape. All fingers point to Granny Puckett being the real villain of this story. Not Boingo, who was driven to a life of crime just to compete with his neighbors who were struggling in poverty. Granny Puckett has driven her forest to hell and back. But fortunately for her, her squad of cops and media were able to arrest the first bunny that stood up to her and her evil regime and reassure all of the people that the status quo is just fine.
And you'll wake up tomorrow morning with piping hot tea cakes at your doorstep, same as always.
And if you were to say, Nathan, there's no evidence of Granny selling anything through a middleman to bakers, that there's a larger company that's pulling the strings and making the decisions here, and that Granny herself was even questioned by the cops in the beginning and they thought she was the goody bandit, I'd say to you,